March 29, 1973. The last American prisoners of war board a transport at Clark Air Base in the Philippines. They come home. Across the country, over the course of that final year, roughly 591,000 service members are discharged and make the same trip. Many of them fly into Travis Air Force Base in California, take buses to Oakland, and at airports across the country, at San Francisco International, in Chicago at O'Hare, and at LaGuardia in New York, some of them are met with protests.
How bad was it?
In 1989, a syndicated columnist named Bob Greene asked Vietnam veterans to write him about their homecoming experiences. He received hundreds of letters. He went back and verified many of the stories personally. He published them in a book called Homecoming, When the Soldiers Returned from Vietnam. What he found? Spitting happened. Verbal abuse happened. Baby killer happened. A 1990 academic study measured the psychological effects. 44.3% of Vietnam veterans reported what researchers called low homecoming support.
What's the comparison number?
For all U.S. veterans, 26%. Vietnam veterans were nearly twice as likely to report hostility or indifference when they returned. Controlling for combat exposure, demographics, number of deployments, the study found low homecoming support was independently associated with 2.13 times higher odds of PTSD, 1.91 times higher suicidality.
So the war wasn't the only thing that damaged them.
The researchers called it a double betrayal. The war did what wars do. Then the homecoming compounded it. And for some of these men, especially the ones who'd spent years in Navy boiler rooms, there was a third betrayal waiting that wouldn't announce itself for another 20 years.
Today on Asbestos, a conspiracy 4,500 years in the making.
Episode 33, Project 100,000.
The homecoming no one talks about. Asbestos, a conspiracy 4,500 years in the making, is brought to you by Danziger and Dayano because every diagnosis deserves a team who's been through it. Dandel.com. That's DANDELL.com.
Last episode, we went below decks. Navy boiler rooms during Vietnam, 130 degrees Fahrenheit at working height, 170 degrees on the gantry above, 112 decibels of noise. Asbestos insulation on every pipe, every valve, every gasket. A gunner's mate testified to the Board of Veterans' Appeals that when the ship's guns fired, the vibration shook the insulation loose. His words, there was so much airborne asbestos that it looked like it was snowing inside the vessel.
And the Navy had known since 1939.
Required respirators in 1943, didn't enforce them for sailors. A federal judge called it official connivance at cover-up in 1991. Walter Twidwell, Navy boiler tender, 7 ships, Korea through Vietnam, sued Goodyear Tire and Rubber. A New York jury needed less than 2 hours to award him $40.1 million. He died approximately 1 year later.
Those men came home carrying this.
Some of them came home to something else first. And it matters to understanding how the asbestos crisis went unrecognized, because the veteran population most exposed was the population most overlooked.
Project 100,000. What was McNamara selling?
August 6, 1966, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara announced to the veterans of foreign wars that the military would begin accepting 40,000 recruits each year who previously would have been rejected. Men who scored in the lower ranges on the Armed Forces qualification test. Men from poverty-encrusted backgrounds, as he put it. Military service as a social uplift program. President Johnson called them privately second-class fellows. The official launch was October 1, 1966.
How many men?
By the program's end in December 1971, 354,000. According to Hamilton Gregory, who wrote the book on this, literally, it's called McNamara's Folly. Project 100,000 recruits died at 3 times the rate of other Americans serving in Vietnam. The program acquired a few informal names: McNamara's Folly, McNamara's Misfits.
Who actually got recruited for this so-called project?
They weren't chosen randomly. 38% of Project 100,000 recruits were Black or Hispanic, against 10% in the military standard recruiting pool. Mississippi, 1969, 42% of the state's population was Black. Its National Guard, 1 soldier out of 10,365.
1 Black man in 10,000?
Segregated Guard units gave a lot of white men of draft age a door out of going to Vietnam. Black men in the same state didn't have that door. Project 100,000 became, for a lot of them, the only door there was.
And the asbestos connection, where do these men end up?
Here's what we can document and what we can't. We don't have records mapping Project 100,000 recruits to specific Navy assignments. That data, if it exists, is in the National Archives. But we know 2 things. High asbestos exposure roles in the Navy, boiler tender, machinist's mate, engine room watch, went to lower-ranking enlisted personnel. And Project 100,000 recruits were specifically assigned to positions that, in McNamara's framing, quote, required little intellectual ability. The overlap is structural. It's not documented, but the structure is there.
McNamara promised these men upward mobility, but what really happened?
A follow-up study in 1986. Project 100,000 veterans averaged $17,629 a year. Comparable men who never served, 23,637. Higher divorce rates, higher unemployment. The program produced worse outcomes than not serving at all. The promise was not kept.
Speaking of promises institutions didn't keep, here's one Danziger and Dayano does. Most veterans and their families qualify for 10 to 20 different asbestos trust funds. We file every one they qualify for at once on day 1, which is how compensation arrives in months, not years. Dandel.com.
While all of this was happening, while Vietnam veterans were coming home to hostile airports and Project 100,000 recruits were discovering the promise was empty, another group of veterans was fighting a different legal and political battle, and in 1991, they won something important.
Agent Orange. Start with what got sprayed.
Herbicide operations, 1962 to 1972. Approximately 20 million gallons sprayed over Vietnam and parts of Laos and Cambodia. Agent Orange contained dioxin, a known carcinogen. Veterans started getting sick decades later. Cancers, neurological damage, birth defects in their children. They sued. May 7, 1984, literally the day before trial, chemical manufacturers settled for $180 million. 105,000 claims were received. 52,000 veterans or survivors got payments. The average payment was $3,800.
That's not justice. That's a coupon.
The companies never admitted wrongdoing. But then, 1991, the Agent Orange Act. Congress created something called presumptive service connection. If you served in Vietnam during the right years and developed a disease on the VA's official list, the connection was presumed. You didn't need to prove exposure, didn't need a medical expert to link your cancer to the service. The burden shifted from veteran to the government. Senator Tom Daschle, who co-sponsored the bill, called it bulldozing a clear paved highway directly to the VA. The PACT Act of 2022 extended the same principle to burn pit exposure.
And for veterans with mesothelioma, asbestos exposure, none of that applied.
Not one word of it. A veteran with mesothelioma today still has to prove 3 things: current diagnosis, service records showing exposure likely occurred, and a medical nexus opinion, a physician's written statement connecting the cancer to the service. Even with 30% of all mesothelioma patients being veterans, even with federal court findings of official connivance, the burden is still on them.
Why did Agent Orange get presumptive conditions and asbestos didn't?
A few reasons, and none of them are actually about which exposure was more widespread. Agent Orange was specific to one war, one time window, one government operation. You could point to dates, to maps, to spray records. Asbestos was everywhere. Ships, planes, barracks, vehicles, across every branch, from World War II through the 1980s. Agent Orange was visible. People saw the planes fly. Asbestos fibers are microscopic. And asbestos involved hundreds of civilian manufacturers. Agent Orange primarily involved two chemical companies.
So the complexity of the industry protected the industry.
Yes.
The latency math is brutal. Vietnam service, 1965 to 1973. Asbestos latency, 20 to 50 years. Peak diagnosis window, 1985 to 2023. We may be just past the peak, but we are inside the window still. Men who are 75 or 80 years old today were 20-year-old boiler tenders in the Gulf of Tonkin, and the disease is finding them now. ICOM served on the USS Kearsarge and the USS John Bull, boiler tender. When he was diagnosed with mesothelioma, his first doctor told him it might go away. It didn't go away. What happened instead, ICOM became the first VA patient to receive a cutting-edge surgery called PD, pleurectomy and decortication. He walked into the operating room and said, "It's a beautiful day." 8 years later, ICOM was still here.
His story is in Beating the Odds, Surviving Mesothelioma, compiled by Dave Foster of Danziger and Dayano, free for any family facing a diagnosis. Call the firm or visit dandell.com, DANDELL.com, and ask for a copy.
If you or someone you love is facing a mesothelioma diagnosis, don't navigate this alone. Call Danziger and Dayano. The consultation is free. dandell.com.
You've been listening to Asbestos, a Conspiracy 4,500 Years in the Making, Episode 33, Project 100,000.
Research, writing, and production for this series is supported by Danziger and Dayano, a national mesothelioma law firm with over 30 years of experience and nearly $2 billion recovered for victims and their families.
Next time, the Asbestos Papers, 1977. An attorney in a small Texas town gets access to a box of documents, 6,000 pages. Internal memos going back decades, executives discussing what to do with workers who were going to die. Proof, on paper in their own handwriting, that the industry didn't just know.
They documented that they knew.
Episode 34, on Asbestos, a Conspiracy 4,500 Years in the Making.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
2.13 times higher PTSD odds just from the homecoming reception, independent of combat.
Controlled for deployments, demographics, combat exposure. The hostile reception did that on its own.
ICOM walked in saying, "It's a beautiful day."
8 years ago.
First VA patient to get that protocol.
Which tells you something about how long veterans were waiting for the system to catch up.
$3,800 average payment. No admission of wrongdoing.
The coupon for a war.